Have you ever imagined inheriting something that seems completely useless, only to discover a secret that could change your life forever? That's exactly what happened to Clara. When her eccentric Uncle Harold died, all she was left with was a rundown antique store, a rundown place full of seemingly worthless trinkets. But what she found inside would change everything. A secret room hidden for decades, a mysterious diary, a legendary artifact lost to history, and a grim warning. Clara is the key. What did this mean? Who was Elias Montrose, and why was his name linked to such an ancient secret? More importantly, who else knew about it? What began as an unimportant heirloom quickly became a dangerous hunt for forgotten temples, hidden maps, and an artifact capable of granting unimaginable power. But there's something Clara didn't realize in time. She wasn't the only one looking for the heart of eternity. And now, his life was at stake. Get ready for a story full of twists, betrayals, and mysteries buried by time. What Clara discovered is something no one should know. And now, it may be too late to turn back. If you love mystery stories, conspiracies, and history-defying secrets, subscribe now and turn on notifications. This may be the most shocking truth you will hear this year. Clara never got along with her Uncle Harold. He was a reclusive, eccentric man, and his antique store reflected exactly that, a jumble of trinkets that seemed worthless. So, when the family's lawyer announced that she was the sole heir to the establishment, the surprise was accompanied by frustration. Why did he choose her? What did he expect her to do with that pile of junk? Nothing made sense, but something told him that this story was deeper than it seemed. Upon arriving at the store for the first time as owner, Clara felt overwhelmed by the smell of aged wood and accumulated dust, shelves full of old books, stopped clocks, statues of dubious origin. It was a place as disorderly as Harold himself, and every corner exuded the mystery of his lonely life. But something was wrong. Among all that clutter, some pieces seemed strategically positioned, as if they were hiding something. But what? With a mixture of disinterest and obligation, Clara began looking through her uncle's documents. Receipts, invoices, nothing that would justify such a peculiar will. But then, she found something curious. A sealed envelope with her name written in careful calligraphy. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single key and a short but cryptic phrase. Not everything that glitters is in sight. Look in the office. His heart raced. Was he trying to tell you something? Determined to understand what it all meant, Clara went straight to the small office at the back of the store. The place was tidier than the rest, but still carried the same aura of buried secrets. She observed every inch of the room until something caught her attention. An old bookshelf full of dusty, seemingly untouchable books. He pulled one of them out. Nothing. Another, just dust. But then, as he touched a red leather-bound volume, he heard a click. The wall next to the bookcase moved slightly, as if it was hiding something behind it. His stomach turned. What was your uncle trying to hide? Who else knew about this? As the dust settled, Clara realized she was about to discover something much bigger than a simple inheritance. And at that moment, a single certainty took over his mind. His life would never be the same. Clara's heart was beating so loudly that she could hear it in her own ears. With a mixture of hesitation and adrenaline, she pushed against the hidden wall, which gave way with a heavy creak. The space behind her was plunged into darkness, the smell of old wood and old paper permeating the air. Clara felt around until she found a switch. With a pop, a faint yellowish light illuminated what appeared to be his uncle's small personal safe. But what was inside was nothing like she expected. Scattered around the room were objects that looked like they had been taken straight from a museum. Jade statues, pocket watches set with precious stones, hand-drawn maps, and in the center of the oak table, an ornate iron chest. Clara approached slowly, her fingers gliding over the cold, worked surface of the chest. It seemed locked, but then he remembered the key he had found in the envelope. Holding his breath, he fitted it into the lock and turned it. With a sharp click, the lid opened. Inside the chest, there was something even more enigmatic. Among carefully packaged gold coins and jewelry, an ancient parchment caught the eye. The yellowed paper was filled with strange symbols, as if it had been written in a language lost to time. Beside him, a small leather diary rested, with the initials HM engraved on the cover. Harold Montgomery? No, those initials weren't his uncle's. Clara took the diary with trembling hands, feeling an uneasiness take over. Her body, something in that room, in that discovery, felt wrong. She leafed through the diary, trying to decipher her hasty handwriting. Between scribbles and notes, some phrases caught his attention. The heart of eternity must not fall into the wrong hands. Elias Montrose was right, but no one can know. And the most enigmatic of all, Clara is the key. Her name was there, written decades before she was even born. How was this possible? Who was Elijah Montrose? And what the hell was Heart of Eternity? Before he could process the magnitude of what he had found, a noise from the store broke the silence. Someone was there. Fear froze her in place for a moment, but she quickly grabbed the diary and parchment, closing the trunk as quietly as possible. His instinct screamed that this was not a coincidence. Someone else knew about the secret room, and if they knew what she had just found, they would be willing to do anything to get it. Clara pressed the diary to her chest as she slipped out of the secret room, each step careful to avoid making any noise. The sound of footsteps reverberated through the store, heavy, purposeful. Someone was there, and it wasn't an unsuspecting customer. Her heart pounded as she hid behind a bookshelf, watching a silhouette search the office. The hooded figure moved with precision, as if it already knew exactly what it was looking for. She couldn't stay there. Holding her breath, Clara slowly backed away toward the back exit. But as he took a step, a treacherous squeak escaped the aged wooden floor. The silhouette turned sharply. For an instant, Clara saw the gleam of something metallic. A knife? A weapon? Panic made her act before she could think. With a quick movement, he grabbed an old globe from the shelf and threw it towards the invader. The impact was enough to create a distraction, and Clara ran out the back door, feeling the cold night air hit her face as she dashed down the dark alley. Only when she arrived at her apartment, locking the door behind her, did Clara allow herself to breathe. His hands were shaking, but the diary was still there, pressed against his chest as if it were his only anchor to reality. Who was that person? What did they want? And, most importantly, what did your Uncle Harold know that was worth so much that someone would break into the store looking for it? With her hands still sweaty, Clara turned on a lamp and opened the diary. The pages were fragile, filled with hasty notes, maps, and strange symbols. But what caught his attention most were the last pages. They were not written by Harold, but by someone who lived long before him. The name Elias Montrose has come up repeatedly, always linked to a mysterious artifact called Heart of Eternity. The final sentence in the diary made his blood run cold. Clara is the key. What did this mean? Her uncle knew she would find the diary. But why? What connected a 19th century explorer, a lost artifact, and her? The only thing I knew for sure was that none of this was a coincidence. But there was an even scarier question. Who else knew about this? And how far would they go to find out what she already had in her hands? Insomnia took over Clara that night. The diary was on the table, its pages filled with mysteries that seemed to span centuries. The name Elias Montrose appeared repeatedly. But who was he? And what exactly was the Heart of Eternity? A legendary relic? A hidden treasure? Or something much more dangerous? Her Uncle Harold clearly wanted her to find these answers, but the reason still remained an enigma. Determined to find out more, Clara spent the morning immersed in digital archives, old newspapers, and historical databases. The name Montrose appeared in 19th century exploration records, always linked to daring expeditions and controversial discoveries. But one story in particular caught his attention: a quest in 1882 to find an artifact described as a source of immeasurable power. The reports in it were vague, fragmented, but one thing was clear. Montrose believed he had found the Heart of Eternity, but something went wrong. His records are gone, his name disappears from academic circles, and any mention of the relic has been erased from official history. What did he find that made him disappear? And why did Harold want Clara to resume this investigation? While reviewing forgotten documents in digital archives, an unexpected clue emerged. In an article by an amateur historian, Clara found a sepia photograph showing a group of explorers in front of an unknown temple. In the corner of the image, a man held a parchment identical to the one she had found in Harold's trunk, and below the photo, A name made her catch her breath: Elias Montrose. This was no coincidence. The key piece was somewhere between past and present, and Clara needed to connect the dots. But before she could process everything, an alert snapped her out of her reverie. Your email had been hacked, compromised files, and an anonymous message flashed on the screen with a single warning: stop now, or you'll end up like Montrose. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was too close to the truth. But what terrified her even more was the growing certainty within her. She couldn't stop now. The cold crept up Clara's spine. Someone was watching her. The warning on the screen wasn't a simple threat. It was a clear sign that she wasn't alone in this quest. But who? And how did they know exactly what she was? Investigating? His gaze swept the apartment. The windows were closed. The door was locked. But the feeling of someone watching her was almost tangible. She took the diary and parchment and hid them in her backpack. If their emails had already been hacked, it was a matter of time before they tried something more aggressive. I needed to get out of there. He grabbed the keys and left quickly, his heart pounding. The street was silent, the night air thick with an uneasiness she couldn't ignore. Then, in the reflection of a shop window, she saw it. A man in a black overcoat, standing on the other side of the street. He didn't try to hide. On the contrary, he was there, motionless, as if he was waiting for her to notice him. A test of endurance. If she ran, he would follow. If he stayed, he would be giving himself away. Clara swallowed and did something unexpected. Instead of running away, he walked towards him. The man didn't move, but when she got close enough, he spoke in a low, threatening tone. You have no idea what you're playing at. His cold eyes pierced Clara, but she stood her ground. Then explain to me. The man laughed, but there was no humor there. He leaned forward slightly, as if to whisper a terrible secret. Your uncle died because he didn't know when to stop. Don't make the same mistake. Before she could respond, he disappeared into the crowd that appeared around the corner. Clara stood there, her blood running cold and her mind racing. What did Harold know that made him a target? And more importantly, now that she was involved, what would they do to stop her from continuing? Clara knew she could no longer afford to hesitate. If he was in danger, then the only way to protect himself was to find out the truth before those men silenced it. The most concrete clue he had was in his uncle's diary. An entry mentioned Scotland, and a possible connection between Montrose and an ancient temple hidden in the Highlands. If the Heart of Eternity existed, that was the first place to look. Wasting no time, she booked a flight to Edinburgh, aware that she was entering uncharted territory. The flight was long, but his mind was too restless to rest. She reread every page of Harold's diary, trying to find something that could help her understand what she was getting into. A sentence scrawled at the end caught his attention. The past hides the present. The key has never been in gold, but in what it reflects. What did this mean? Arriving in Scotland, Clara rented a car and drove along winding roads to an isolated village. The biting cold and cloudy sky created a setting worthy of a dark tale. Following the coordinates in the diary, he found the ruins of an ancient Celtic temple, hidden among mist-covered hills. It was there, but she was not alone. As she approached, Clara noticed fresh footprints in the damp ground. Someone had been there recently, or still was. Cold sweat ran down the back of his neck. Cautiously, he entered the ruins, feeling the weight of the past in those ancient stones. Then she saw it. A stone pedestal, covered in moss, with a circular socket in the center. Something should have been there, but it wasn't anymore. Before she could process the discovery, a noise alerted her. A quick movement in the shadow. Clara instinctively turned around, but it was too late. A figure emerged from the darkness, and before it could react, something hit its head. The world spun, vision went dark, and everything dissolved into emptiness. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was a male voice murmuring, "You've come too far." Pain pulsed through Clara's head as she regained consciousness. The cold stone floor pressed against his skin, and the darkness around him felt even more oppressive. Where was it? She blinked a few times, trying to dispel the dizziness, until she realized she was no longer in the temple. It was in some kind of underground chamber. His first instinct was to check his backpack. Empty. The diary, the parchment, everything had been taken. His heart raced. Whoever had brought her here knew exactly what to look for. But why? Trying to remain calm, she slowly got up and began to explore her surroundings. The place looked like an ancient crypt, its walls covered in inscriptions that she could not decipher. But in the center, there was something that caught his attention, a niche carved into the rock, containing a small pedestal. Clara approached, her heart pounding. On the Yaiya pedestal rested a metallic sphere, its dull shine reflecting the dim light filtering from some distant opening. It was familiar. The temple socket. That should be there. If this object was part of the puzzle, then perhaps the Heart of Eternity wasn't just a legend. But before she could pick it up, a sound echoed down the hall behind her. Steps. Several. Clara threw herself back, looking for any shadow to hide behind. The entrance to the chamber lit up as two figures entered, speaking in whispers. The fragment is here. A man's voice sounded impatient. If Montrose was right, this is one of the three. 3? So there was more? Clara held her breath. These men knew much more than she did. But now, he also knew something important. That wasn't the only fragment of the artifact. As soon as the men moved forward to take the sphere, Clara saw her only opportunity. Acting quickly, he knocked over one of the torches that lit the room. The instant the light flickered and chaos took. Over! She rushed to the pedestal and grabbed the sphere. Take it! One of them shouted. Clara didn't wait to see what would happen. She ran down the narrow hallway, feeling footsteps behind her. His mind spun. 3 fragments. If this was one, where were the others? And most importantly, how far would these people go to get them? She didn't know the answer yet, but there was one thing he was sure of. He wouldn't stop until he found out. The small plane's engine roared against the freezing winds as Clara flew over the imposing mountains of Nepal. The map she had found in Harold's diary pointed there, the last fragment of the Heart of Eternity. After Scotland and Greece, every clue, every discovery brought her to that moment. But she was not alone. Someone else knew where she was going. Upon disembarking in a remote village, Clara noticed the suspicious looks of the local inhabitants. The temple he was looking for was in the mountains, a place shrouded in legends and secrets. According to records, Montrose was there before he disappeared from history, and Harold spent years trying to find what he had left behind. The trail to the temple was brutal, the biting cold, the treacherous terrain, but none of that prepared her for what she found when she arrived. Among snow-covered ruins, Clara saw what appeared to be a ceremonial altar, and there, embedded in the stone, a fitting identical to that of the other fragments. She took out the 2 pieces she had obtained and fitted them onto the altar. A faint glow ran across the surface of the stone, as if something was awakening. But before he could react, a familiar voice echoed across the room. I knew you would take us here. Clara turned around, her heart racing. It was the man in the overcoat, the one who followed her from the beginning, and he wasn't alone. You don't understand what you're doing, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But I understand very well, he replied, walking down the aisle. The Heart of Eternity. It's not just a legend. It grants power to whoever possesses it. And now, thanks to you, we are one step closer to completing it. Before Clara could stop him, the man placed the 3rd fragment on the altar. The ground shook, and intense light exploded from the stone, causing the air to vibrate around them. Then, everything was silent. What had they just awakened to? Now I want to hear from you. What would you do in Clara's place, after everything she's been through? Do you think the Heart of Eternity should it be discovered, or are some secrets too dangerous to reveal? Leave your comment below. And if you like this story full of mysteries and twists, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This way, you don't miss the next revelations. Because believe me, there are still many secrets hidden out there. And speaking of which, if you think this story was intense, wait until you see what we find out in the next video. Click here to watch now. You won't believe what we found. See you there.